Number one, I want to thank Julia here for putting this event on. Oh, okay, thank you.
Happy that you joined us, really happy. So I'm so proud that Kris Gethin made it for us in person. Woo, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. But thank you, Julia, for putting on such an event like this, because I know it is very difficult to put on something like this, but I want to give her a round of applause, because what we're doing is fighting against the couch, fighting against the remote, fighting against the fast food that is out there. And it's kind of weird when you think about it that we're a niche community, because we want to actually take care of ourselves. We want to improve our health span, the way that we think, the way that we move. We actually want to have a better quality of life, yet we're the niche, and people look at us weird if we want to take care of ourselves, if we're going to bed earlier, if we're in front of the red light panel or grounding ourselves. People think we're odd, we're the outliers, and we're here to change that, and Julia's putting on a phenomenal job in contributing to that cause as well. So thank you, Julia. So athletic performance, antioxidants, and inflammation. So I come from the fitness background, and in helping a lot of people in the fitness background, I quickly realized, and through going from a very young age, participating in athletic sports, I realized a lot of the people with the six packs, the shoulders, the delts, aren't always that healthy. They look great on the outside, but not necessarily on the inside. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed with mold toxicity in 2014 that I realized that myself. Of course, my lifestyle didn't contribute to that mold toxicity, but it allowed me to open this gateway into biohacking and really understanding the health implications that a lot of us and athletes put ourselves through. So, you know, this is an older slide, by the way. I didn't have time to go through and recheck this. Apparently, my new creative designer is dyslexic. I've got dyscalculus, so if there's any number issues here, I'll take that on board. But if anybody would like to have the updated version of these slides, just come and see me, send me an Instagram message, whatever, and I will send that through to you, okay? So please, I apologize for that. So from a very young age, 6 years old, I started racing motocross. I raced motocross for about 10 years. Then I got into downhill mountain biking, into bodybuilding, and all my business, or the majority of my business ventures, are within this field of health, fitness, and health span. And they all kind of cross-pollinate each other. I don't necessarily excel in one thing, so I do a lot of things, and hopefully collectively they may excel. But when I transitioned from motocross and downhill mountain biking, through injuries, I found bodybuilding and weight training. Through resistance training and physiotherapy, I was alleviated of a lot of the pain and from the injuries that I'd accumulated over the years. And of course, when I'd lost my identity from those sports and I'm dealing with the pain, I fell into a depression. I was dealing with pain, and the only way that I could find that I could mask that was, unfortunately, a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol for several years there. My community and social awareness was pretty much zero, and because I didn't have this identity that was used to adrenaline, I sought it elsewhere. And it was basically a mask. And as I said, it wasn't until I found weight training that I was alleviated of this, and I thought, I'm going to study this a little bit more. Started studying nutrition and everything that I could around training, nutrition, supplementation, and then I realized, hold on, I can actually retain this content. I must have an interest in this, because I failed in school. I hated school, I hated every minute. As I said, I had dyscalculus. That wasn't really diagnosed back then either, so I had a lot of frustration in school. But anyway, nevertheless, when I found weight training and natural drug-free bodybuilding, so I didn't even know drug-free bodybuilding even existed. When I competed in my first show, I was competing against people that were enhanced. And I've got nothing against that whatsoever, but then later I found out, oh, there are tested shows. So then I only continued to bodybuilding tested shows. And because now I'm nourishing my food, nourishing my brain with food that it wanted, that it needed, I was a little bit smarter. I could, like I said, retain content, so I started creating businesses out of this field. First, I went and studied international health and sports therapy for 3 years, just so I could get the groundwork. But as I said, that is the groundwork. Then we learn so much more following that through real life experiences and what we do with our clients. And then I went on to wanting to reach more people as opposed to just one-on-one training. So then I purchased my first gym in 2002 in Australia. I'm not from Australia. A lot of Americans think I am. I'm from Wales, but I lived in Australia for a little while. I worked on cruise liners in the late 90s as a personal trainer and massage therapist. And then after owning that gym for several years, I thought, well, how can I reach more people? There was no internet, so I started submitting content to magazines. But I had no idea how to write. So I purchased Merriam-Webster's book on journalistic writing, taught myself how to write, and started submitting content. It started to stick after I had annoyed a lot of these publishers for about 6 months. And then I thought, I love this. I want to do this full time. I wasn't necessarily getting so much feedback unless I actually went to events. And then people say, hey, I like your articles, I like the content, I like those training principles that you put in this magazine and whatnot. So I thought, okay, it is actually getting read because we didn't necessarily have internet to have that interaction. And so that's when I decided to up and leave, sell the gym, move to Venice, California, see if I could get a contract with Weeder Publications that had Muscle and Fitness Hers, Flex Magazine, etc. And again, after annoying the editor-in-chief, Peter McGough, for about 6 months, he said, okay, I'll give you a shot. And then I continued to do that full time. I then published my own magazine, become the editor-in-chief of bodybuilding.com back then in 2007. So now I'm reaching more and more people, and the internet has started to explode. Social platforms followed after that. And I thought, this is phenomenal, because I grew up on a farm in Wales where I couldn't interact or engage with anybody. There wasn't a social community of support. And that's what I realized that I needed when I went down that rabbit hole of drinking and alcohol, because there wasn't like a support network there. But now we have this support network, which is great, where we can be transparent, we can be accountable to each other. And that's what I found is really the tipping point in helping people to apply. A lot of us know what to do. We have the knowledge. We can all become students of learning. That's great. But without being a student of application, a lot of that is just left dormant. There's a lot of people out there a lot smarter than me. I recognize my weaknesses. I got a lot of them. But I do apply myself every day. And a reason why I find that I am able to apply myself is because of the food that I eat, the biohacks that I kind of apply, waking up in the morning, going for a run, going for a swim, going for a cycle ride, outside whenever possible, earthing, grounding, getting the red spectrums from the sunlight. That is like my AA batteries in the morning. I don't need coffee. That is the AA battery that is feeding our mitochondria for allowing us to assimilate the good food, hopefully, that we are eating in order for us to continue to evolve. Now, what I have found being a part of like the fitness community and bodybuilding community and the biohacking community, so for instance, like I was just in New York last weekend and I was speaking mostly to a biohacking and bodybuilding. In 2 weeks' time, I'll be in Vegas at the Mr. Olympia, where it'll just be bodybuilding. And then the week after that, I'll be in Dubai, where it'll just be biohacking. And what I have found between these demographics is quite fascinating. So the athletic performers and the bodybuilders, they will obviously hit their exercises 5 times a week, or their gym workouts, the cardiovascular movements. I do Ironman as well, so you'll see a lot of those people overtrained. They will really push themselves to the max. But what I found, and of course I'm generalizing, I'm not pointing at anyone here, but a lot of people in the biohacking community, they are like, give me the red light, give me the supplements, give me the PEMF, give me the blue light blocking glasses. I want to purchase my health as opposed to apply for it, okay? Now what we need to do is combine this together. And it's quite simple. A lot of people don't find value in stuff that is free. If I tell my clients, you need to get to bed earlier, you need to meditate in the morning, you need to take yourself out of this parasympathetic state into this, out of the sympathetic state into your parasympathetic state. But it's with these free things, and they're like, no, there's no value, it's too difficult, it's too hard. You know, if I ask everybody here, you know, I know that you all just meditated, but if I ask, hey, do you meditate? A lot of people say no. Because it's difficult, we're used to distraction, and it's free. But if we've purchased something, let's say we've purchased that ice bath, we've got that sauna, we'll probably use that at least 3-5 times a week, correct? So what we've got to do is combine both. So I know, for instance, if I will just do bodybuilding, it's not necessarily going to be healthy for me. If I just do athletic endurance sports like Ironman, ultramarathon, whatever, it's probably not going to be healthy for me, especially if I push it to the extreme. Or CrossFit, or Spartan. So what I like to do is do a little bit of all of those. I'm not necessarily going to excel because you have to be built a certain way or train a certain way to be like that, but I want to be healthy in doing it. Like I love participating in endurance sports because I love that community. The community is awesome. They're very supportive, much like this community. And I'm a bit of a hermit. I'm much better in front of people than necessarily interacting with people. So that is my way of engaging. I live far away from my family. And we know, if we study the blue zones, that engagement and social interaction is part of us increasing our health span, okay? So I find ways in doing that, and I encourage you to do the same. You just probably did it with the meditation here right now. So in my early 20s, as I mentioned, like I was racing motocross, I still have it right now. I have a severe curvature of my spine. If you look at my spine, it's like left aligned in my pelvis by about 2 inches. Exercise alleviates me of a lot of those issues. It's the long haul flights that get to me. So usually when I land, I have to move, I exercise, I'll go for a swim, maybe have a massage. That really helps. But this is my accountability. I'm like, I have to exercise. I don't have kids to be, to give me that accountability. I've got these issues and I've got these pains, but the number one thing is it makes me feel great. I'm energized, I'm focused. Like I hated public speaking when I was younger. Now I've gotten used to it, but a part of the reason was because I'd have this cloud, I'd have this fog, and I'd be umming and ahhing and trying to think of a word. But I've been able to biohack, not my environment, but like my nutritional protocol, my sleep, my circadian rhythm, so I can communicate with you today and actually enjoy this engagement and interaction. So I had raised liver enzymes. I've had major asthma since I was a kid. I got croup when I was young, had pneumonia a couple of times, but I was able to get over the asthma as well by looking at the food groups I was eating, mainly removing dairy, mainly removing gluten, and then after a few years, I'm like, oh, that's weird, I don't have asthma anymore. So if I go back to certain types of dairy every now and again, I feel the tightening of my chest, okay? So there's certain things that I've been able to overcome. The raised liver enzymes, as I mentioned, I was drinking alcohol for several years, and a lot of it, I'd drink a bottle of vodka before going out. And this was just fun. This wasn't alcoholism, but this was fun on weekends. But my body could take a lot. And of course, I had raised liver enzymes because of that. And it didn't really get any better with bodybuilding, even though I was eating healthy. But I was eating a lot more than the average person. I wasn't looking to see if that food was grass-fed, humane-raised, antibiotic-free, wild-caught. No. So of course, I'm just punishing myself more and more and more. And then when I found biohacking, then I was able to lower these enzymes. I had no idea that the dental interference that I had in my mouth, the metal, I had a gold tooth here up until a couple of years ago. It looked cool, it looked badass, but I was like, it has to come out. I don't want to act like an antenna anymore. And then I had 2 metal implants, and of course had metal amalgams, all that sort of stuff, leaching into my system. And I would never have known about all of this had I not been introduced into the world of biohacking. And in 2014, when I had that mold toxicity For about 3 years there, I'd had it 2 years, actually 2 years. I had no idea what was wrong with me. I was sleeping about 3 hours a night, but because of that, I had this aggressive nature about me. I was like, I'm still going to out-train you, I'm still going to outwork you, I'm still going to burn a candle at both ends, you know, like kind of like Gary V entrepreneurship spirit, you know, you're weak if you sleep, and that's obviously not good. And when I got diagnosed of that mold toxicity, that's when I realized, okay, there's a different world out here. There's mold and mycotoxins in coffee, in chocolate, in red wine, in grains. And can you imagine how many athletic performers and bodybuilders, for instance, eat double that of the normal people? You know, we usually eat about maybe 3 meals a day. If you're fasting, maybe 1 or 2. But the majority of athletes, runners, bodybuilders, triathletes, etc., they're eating about 6 meals a day. That's a lot of glyphosate. That's a lot of antibiotics. There's a lot of pesticides, herbicides, etc., and a lot of mold. There's more mold in our grain here than there is in Europe. We have a much lower limit here. So when the EU says we can't use these grains, the US will go, well, we'll have it. And we're consuming that. And this is why I want to bring so much more awareness to the athletic community and the biohacking community and how they can kind of integrate and help each other. So what can biohackers learn from bodybuilders and endurance athletes? Well, we know that bone density from weight training or resistance training leads to longevity as well. You hear about people, my grandmother was one of them, they lose their balance as they get a little bit older, and then they break a hip, and then only 6 months later, they're dead. And a lot of that is to do with the frailty of the bones, and not that bone density, and balance and coordination, of course. And they've studied in Okinawa, a lot of these participants, or a lot of these people that are centenarians, stand and sit from the floor about 40 times a day. They're over 100 years old. That's their resistance training, and their bone density is great. If you compare them to a population over here, it's like the bone density of a 50, 40-year-old. So we should all be resistance training. I always have my clients, if they've got an office job, to sit and stand every 30 minutes, 30 times. If I'm on a plane over on the way here, and I learned this from Ben Greenfield when we were touring in India, do some toilet squats. Keep moving every hour. So I always get the aisle seat because I'm always drinking a lot of water, electrolytes, and doing those toilet squats in the airplane toilets. So you want to make sure that you have resistance training, not just for the aesthetics, but for your bone density as well. And then, obviously, if we've got more muscle density, I'm not on about massive muscles, but muscle density, we're going to be more metabolically active as well. So if we are over-consuming some carbohydrates or we are over-consuming certain calorie groups, then we're going to be more metabolically active to burn them off. And then the blood glucose stability. Of course, there's ways we know in the biohacking community of regulating your blood glucose. That could be from chromates, it could be from berberine, dihydroberberine, metformin, cold thermogenesis, whatever. But if we have good muscle density, and we're active and we're moving, we're going to have much better blood glucose stability as well throughout the day. You don't want those highs and troughs. Of course, post-workout, you may want to have a bit of a spike, but for the most part, we do want to steady that flow. And a great thing about this community now is there's a CGM, I noticed, there's a CGM stored booth downstairs. We're able to monitor our blood glucose now. So back in 2017, I had the Dexcom G6. I had to pay hundreds of dollars for it back then. And I wore that for about a year just to see what sort of food groups would have certain responders to me and what I could do to help stabilize that. You know, one of the best things I found for me was sleeping better, go figure, that free stuff that we spoke about, and ice baths. So within about 20, 30 minutes of me waking up, I'm in my ice bath. Now, of course, I can't always do that when I'm traveling, so it's a cold shower or whatever I can do to help regulate that blood glucose. If I'm traveling, I generally engage in more biohacks. When I'm at home, living on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho, I don't necessarily need to do as much, but when I'm on the road, I do. So that's what I'm going to rely on a little bit more on supplementation and things like that. And then the squat and grip strength. We know that squat and grip strength is associated with longevity. Now, you don't necessarily have to do grip strengthening exercises, but if you're doing side raises, if you're doing curls, if you're doing shrugs, you're automatically working that grip strength. Carrying the shopping, make sure you park at the end of the parking lot, as opposed to getting into that one that's next to the disabled spot. You know, walk a little bit more, that grip strength will help. And you don't necessarily have to have a massive bar on your back to squat. You can do a leg press, you can do freestanding squats, you can do goblet squats, you can do hack squat, you can do split squats. There's all sorts of things that you can do to help with that strength. Best thing to do is just go to the gym a couple of times a week with a required program that will hit all of these muscle groups so you have symmetry and you have balance, okay? And then mobility. So, of course, like triathletes, endurance athletes, CrossFitters, we generally have good mobility. We're going to stretch before our workouts. We're going to maybe do yoga. I like aerial yoga. But we're generally increasing our mobility. We're stretching in between sets, okay? So that really helps with the elongation of the muscle and with our stability and sometimes our balance, okay? So I was on a balance ball this morning, actually. And then, what can bodybuilders learn from biohackers? So this is where it gets cool, because generally, I'm saying bodybuilders, but athletic performers, let's call it that. We generally are spiking our cortisol all the time. When I'm working with a lot of high performers, athletes, they're usually high performers in life. It's not me trying to get them to do stuff is difficult, it's me getting them to bring it back a little bit, because we're overachievers. So that cortisol is spiked quite often. And what we need to do is try to regulate that a little bit. We're not usually sleeping enough. We've got deadlines to meet. We've got to take the kids to school. We got a lot of stress in our life. And luckily, there's no artificial light in here. That's bad, so I don't have to wear my blue light blocking glasses. But we're exposed. We're usually in low ceilings with that flicker, raising our cortisol as well. So and maybe when we do our HIIT workouts, we do our ice bath, we do our sauna, we're doing our weight training, we're spiking cortisol. So what can we do in between to manage that? And this is where athletes can really learn from the biohacking community. Because now we have the vagal nerve stimulators, we know that we have the ice bath. I've actually got a vagal nerve stimulator on me right now, vibrating. It's called the Neuro. So I've got this in focus. It really helps me with getting into that parasympathetic state or sleeping, especially on planes. So there's a lot available to us that we never had available before. And we know cortisol can be a very catabolic hormone. If you're trying to mobilize fatty acids, if you're trying to build muscle, improve your muscle protein synthesis, you got to bring that cortisol down a little bit. I've known quite a few top level athletes, world champion UFC fighters, world champion bodybuilders, world champion endurance athletes, Olympic athletes. And one thing I've noticed by observation is that a lot of these people are just really chilled. They're really calm characters. And I wonder if there's a correlation here where they're able to manage their cortisol. There's a guy that I sponsored for a while, Jesse Norris. He was the strongest pound-for-pound power lifter in the world. And in front of the camera, when we'd say, okay, we're going to record and talk about this, that, the other, it was terrible, horrendous, because he was so chilled out, man, so relaxed. And I've noticed that. So maybe if we want to mobilize the fat, and he was ripped, he had abs, and he was a world champion powerlifter. So if we want to mobilize these fatty acids and we want to maintain that muscle protein synthesis, maybe we should look at chilling out a little bit, you know? So, you know, in the gym, quite often, there's low ceilings, a lot of flicker. You know, that's when maybe you can wear your amber lens. You know, we don't want to wear the red lens because we do want a little bit of artificial light coming in because we want to be alert. And then mitigating, you know, earthing as well. Earthing is a big one for me. Now, I didn't know how important earthing was until a year ago, and I've been earthing for many years. Until a year ago, I was doing some work overseas in Mumbai. And I was grounding myself in the morning, going for a walk on the beach, and I wear earthing shoes. I've got an earthing sheet, blah, blah, blah. I'm always grounding. And I noticed that I just wasn't sleeping as well in the evening. Now, of course, in the hotel, I'm being exposed to a lot more EMFs than I used to. I understand that I have to employ some more biohacks when I'm traveling as opposed to at home. And then I spoke to my friend about it, and I was like, man, I'm looking at my sleep score. It's terrible. I'm feeling shit in the morning. My HRV is tanked. And he said, try earthing in the evening before you go to bed as well. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. Would you believe it? I started sleeping so much better. My HRV started to come back up. My sleep quality was improved. I can't say that's a placebo effect because I'm measuring it and I'm sleeping. So that's when I realized, of course, not everybody is electrosensitive. My wife's not, but I definitely am. So I do whatever I can to mitigate the effects of that EMF, because if I'm not sleeping, I'm not recovering, I'm not performing. Your recovery is dictated by your performance. So a lot of people are just jacking themselves up with stims and getting amped up, putting corn on the stereo and wanting to work out, but they're not really focusing or prioritizing their recovery, okay? And, mitigating EMFs, I believe, is a big part of that, and earthing in correlation with that as well, okay? So, like for EMFs, of course, there's a lot of things that we can do. We can have an internet cable in our homes. We can, we have these EMF mitigating devices. I've got like a key shield. I've got the Vivo base on me right now. The fanny pack. This isn't a bodybuilder's fanny pack filled with drugs or supplements. It's actually an EMF blocking fanny pack. Same with my phone that's down here. I've got a cover. So I'm always conscious of that. People may say, God, it's a lot to think about. Hey, if it makes me feel better and I'm more productive, I don't have to think about it. It just becomes second nature. There's a lot of things that I've applied, didn't work, okay, get it out. Much like you writing a book. You have to get chapters from different people, different things that you apply to yourself. If it works, great, you've made your book. But it's constantly evolving. There'll be a second edition and a third edition. And then testosterone optimization. So this is where the spelling mistakes come in. Contrast therapy. So as people and athletes, we want to optimize our own natural testosterone levels whenever possible. Of course, it may need to be supported, but a lot of the things that we apply doesn't require like TRT or anything like that. Sleep is number one. Making sure that we're sleeping well, maybe removing ourselves of like phthalates and stuff like that. But contrast therapy and red light therapy, I have found has been phenomenal. Using red light therapy every day. Of course, for the guys out here, you'll have to be naked and make sure that red light is on your crown jewels for that. And I found that by, I get my testosterone checked every 3 months. Through applying ice baths every day, I've found my testosterone levels have gone back up. I got COVID pretty bad in 2020. I had long COVID. My test tanked. And I honestly thought, God, I'm getting on a bit now. I'm 50 years old. Maybe I'm going to need TRT. But then I spoke to my friend Thomas, who owns Morozco Forge, and he said, just try doing the ice bath every day. If you can do it twice a day, great. So I started doing it morning and night. Do about 3 minutes in the morning, 1 minute in the evening, because I find any more than that, I don't really sleep well. And my testosterone levels started to really creep back up. Slowly, but surely, it went in the right direction. So there's a lot of value in that. Of course, who likes getting in an ice bath? I still don't, but I do it because it makes us harder to kill, And then avoidance of plastics, phthalates, phytoestrogens. So we know in a lot of personal hygiene products, our laundry detergents, the acids, the paints, the lacquers in our house, that's why I do suggest people do have an air filtration in their house, like a, the air doctor, you've got the Jasper, a lot of good filters, because when you test the air in your house, it's usually a lot more contaminated than what it is outside. The carpets, you've got to think of all these things that have these phytoestrogens, or could be estrogen mimickers. And then when we look at the laundry detergents, okay, I just went for a run this morning, I'm sweating. If I've got bad detergent, then I'm absorbing that through these open pores, much like if you put some sort of bubble bath in your bath or some sort of cleansing lotion, your pores are open, you're in the shower, and you're absorbing a lot of these estrogen mimickers. And, you know, our DNA hasn't changed over the years, so it has to be our environment, because if you look at testosterone levels over the past 30 years, they've just tanked. So it has to be our environment. I try not to utilize a lot of plastics. You know, the food prep company that gets delivered to me, it's all in plastic, but I'll never microwave in a plastic. You see a lot of bodybuilders always microwaving their food in the plastics. I'm like, oh my God. Again, that's something that bodybuilders and athletes, because they're always walking around with their Tupperware containers, can really learn from the biohacking community. We don't really use microwaves much anyway, but when they do, it's usually in plastic. And you're absorbing this. I'm sure you've all been past like a supermarket. You've seen the plastic bottles stacked up outside in the blazing sun, maybe there for weeks, and we consume this, and we get all these microplastics into our system, and it's not good. And then, obviously, gut health. Our gut produces a lot of hormones, the majority of our hormones. So back in 2014, when I got diagnosed with mold toxicity, Dr. Spanag in Oldsmar, Florida, he said, your gut's your first brain. A lot of doctors will say, that's your brain, that's your second brain. But he actually prioritized the gut health, because I have noticed as well that if you have constant inflammation in your gut, it can lead to a chemical imbalance and response in your brain. So sometimes people who are not feeling good, maybe they're dealing with some sort of mental disorder or dysfunction, a lot of the time it's coming from what they're feeding their gut microbiome. Are they taking advantage of contributing to the opportunist flora in their gut? And a lot of the time it's not. You know, we're consuming, like I said, athletes double the amount of food so we can have double the amount of damage. Yeah, and we got glyphosate, antibiotics, refined vegetable oils, sugars, artificial sweeteners, particularly here in the US, is in absolutely everything. You know, we want it calorie-free, we want it low calories, we want it to taste good. So a lot of the time we're going for these artificial sweeteners. Again, I'm not talking about use, but in overconsumption can lead to gut dysbiosis. So I've had a lot of my clients take artificial sweeteners out of their supplement protocol, because we'll have artificial sweeteners in the coffee and condiments, in energy drinks, and then they go and start taking supplements, electrolytes, essential amino acids, pre-workouts, post-workout. That's a lot of artificial sweetener that the body has to deal with. And a lot of these people, when they remove it, they have no idea that they had a gut issue until they remove it and heal their gut and go, oh wow, I feel so much better. I don't feel so bloated. I'm able to digest and assimilate the food so much easier. I feel better because of it. And then the other thing that we can learn from the biohacking community is peptide and peptide bioregulators as well. So as you can imagine, when you're an athletic performer, you usually gonna have some type of injury. I've injured a lot, not so much in the gym, always outside of the gym, you know, snowboarding, mountain biking, surfing. I've torn my hamstring, my trap, my pec, my tricep, both of my shoulders, the list goes on. Had I known about certain peptides and peptide bioregulators, I've had stem cells several times as well. World changes. It makes you feel so much better. And we can take advantage of these things now. I had my stem cells for the first time in 2017. I was getting ready for an Ironman, and when I was doing the open water swimming, my wife was saying, you're swimming like that, because I had torn infraspinatus and torn rotator cuff and labrum. So I was swimming in a corner. Had stem cells put in there, and now, obviously, with being conscious of it, my shoulder felt so much better. And then we've got other things that are less invasive. We got our body protective compound, BBC 157, TB 500, and then we've got certain other peptides that can enhance with brain cognition, your eyesight, etc. We can learn a lot. Like just before I came up on stage, I had a little bit of CMAX. You know, CMAX, that cognitive enhancer, and it also can help protect your brain. Also creatine. Creatine is phenomenal for the brain. So I'll take that, especially if I'm low on sleep. It'll really help me recover from sleep. It isn't just to replenish ATP so you can lift more. You know, there's so many other benefits to it. And then antioxidants. So the one thing that we will hear about, and I'm just singling out this antioxidant here, which is carbon C60 or ESS60, is the human grade form, MyVital C. So this is a phenomenal antioxidant that is more powerful than vitamin C, but it doesn't have the hormetic, it doesn't blunt the hormetic response. We want that hormetic response. When we work out, okay, now what our idea is that with this inflammation that we've gathered, now we've got to recover. That inflammation will allow the body to become faster, to become stronger. Much like, you know, if you do ice baths, you shouldn't do an ice bath for an extended amount of time straight after a workout, because again, that will blunt the hormetic response. And is certain, or a lot of antioxidants will do the same. So generally, athletes will stay away from antioxidants, and maybe their immune system is now compromised. But what we have found is that there's certain antioxidants like C60, like hydrogen, that doesn't blunt the hormetic response. So this is phenomenal. I usually take these supplements when I'm flying to help me go through time zones and beat a lot of the reactive oxygen species that is being delivered to me. And by taking these supplements, I know that I'm going to have strong antioxidant profile, and I'm going to be able to work out and not worry about blunting that hormetic response. Like I said, hydrogen is another one of them. Vitamin C and vitamin E are one of those, a couple of those vitamins that can blunt that hormetic response. So athletic performers shouldn't necessarily have it around their workout, but there are certain individuals that have a lot of oxidative stress. You know, maybe because of their age or their lifestyle choices, like drinking alcohol, not sleeping well, dietary, you know, refined vegetable oils, etc. So it's going to be different for everybody, dependent on your baseline, okay? And this is kind of like a summary of what we've been talking about here. I want to be cognizant of the time here. But the one thing that I get a lot of my athletic clients to do now is something that they never would have dreamed of before, is fast. Because a lot of people that are trying to build muscle are like, oh my God, I can't miss my 6 meals for the day, I'll have a heart attack. You know, a lot of these people would burn down their house before allowing that last tin of fish or tuna or whatever to escape them. They need their protein, you know. But what we've found is controlled fasting on their non-training days in particular can be very, very helpful for their longevity. I will generally get some clients to take their biological age test. Like I know Jean is going to be talking about biological age. So I encourage everybody to listen to this talk after, and I'm going to be certainly listening in as well. If I take the biological age, and you can do it through the Horvath test, you know, methylation test, you can telomeres, glycans, etc., you'll generally see a lot of these people's biological age is much higher than their chronological age. But they look great. They've got a six-pack. They're able to, you know, hit fantastic records on their runs, etc. But there's a lot of inflammation and a lot of reactive oxygen species that are happening with these individuals. What I've found by fasting, of course, there's a lot of other things. There's a bullet approach or shotgun approach. But controlled fasting really helps, really, really helps, because it helps clean up the damaged DNA, the folded proteins. We know it as autophagy, self-eating. That really, really helps because, as I said earlier, a lot of these people are consuming a lot of food. Now, if that person is very, very concerned, I will do what's called a controlled fasting protocol. So I'll give them essential amino acids or electrolytes during that time. It's usually essential amino acids, so to prevent some type of catabolism that they may be encountering or psychologically encountering. So we'll usually buffer it with that, okay? Not branched chain amino acids, a little bit too high in leucine, which has that anabolic responder, but essential amino acids. And then prioritizing recovery. So a lot of people will think, okay, recovery, okay, I'm just going to finish working out now and I'll just go and eat my food and have my supplements. Not necessarily so. You want to take yourself out of that sympathetic dominant state now, straight into your parasympathetic state as soon as humanly possible, because you're going to go and perform again in 24 hours' time. So what I'll generally do, what I've learned from the biohacking community is, maybe take some reishi mushrooms. It's very calming. Maybe use the brain tap. I love the brain tap. If I'm amped from a workout, it's very difficult for me to now bring it down quick. So I'll use technology in that instance, and I think brain tap is phenomenal. I think that they're actually exhibiting down here, so go check out brain tap. I absolutely love them. Then you've got your pulsetta, you've got the Apollo Neuro that I'm wearing now. Those are those vagal nerve stimulators, because you want to balance your vagal nerve. You don't necessarily want to do an ice bath straight after the workout, so that's where that really comes in. And then, you've got the EMF protection, the earthing, and blah, blah, blah. As I mentioned before, stem cells can be phenomenal, not only to help with injuries, but to help with your organs as well. Of course, we're aging. Our stem cell bank is getting withdrawn all the time. Maybe you lived a life like I did when I was younger, which wasn't a healthy life. So I know I was withdrawing stem cells. Every time I got injured, I'm withdrawing stem cells. We actually have the technology now to actually get injected with stem cells. Doesn't necessarily have to be in a joint, it can be an IV. So I always encourage people, if you have the funds, because it's not cheap, then take advantage of today's technology like that. And then hyperbaric oxygen, a lot of places have. HBOT now helps with healing, helps with wound healing, helps with oxygenation of the body and the brain. Phenomenal. And then we maintaining our NAD and glutathione levels. Like I'm conscious now at 50 years old that my NAD levels and my pool is actually come down quite a bit. So I will always, like if I'm traveling, I'm doubling up on the supplements. I've actually got the patch on me right now. I don't necessarily wear this when I'm at home, but when I'm traveling, I know that NAD pool is being withdrawn as well. And then managing and measuring your blood glucose response. We've got the 24-hour CGMs now, which is phenomenal. Take advantage of that quantification. Avoidance of things like Teflon. So I'm sure everybody here knows when you're cooking with Teflon and you make a scratching in, now you could be exposed to that in the fumes when you're cooking and in your foods. And then utilizing stimulants that don't overly raise cortisol. So I don't do too much caffeine. I'm sure you can acknowledge I don't really need much of it. And I'm always aware that my cortisol levels could be spiked. I could be in that sympathetic dominant state, because I generally am. So I will try to stay away from stimulants that raise it. Paraxanthine, I'm sure a lot of people here have heard of Sean Wells, very good friend of mine. He's been able to isolate this metabolite, paraxanthine, from caffeine that doesn't have those downstream effects of cortisol, of the diuretic effect, that anxiety, because there's a lot of us that are very slow caffeine metabolizers. Paraxanthine has a very short half-life, and it gives you a euphoric effect. And then, as I mentioned, there's nootropics that us bodybuilders are now, and athletes have learned from the biohacking community that can help with that cognitive enhancement without being too stimmed out. And now we'll hand it off to questions. Are there any questions here? We've only got about 5 minutes of questions, max, I'm afraid, because Jean is going to be on next. So please, thank you.
Good morning. The information was excellent. We're just wondering, what's the device on your arm? I don't know if you said it. I know about the rest that you named, but what's the one on your arm?
So it's an iron layer. I'm not sponsored by these people, by the way. It's called iron layer. And what it does, it absorbs, I've got like NAD on here. So you have a positive and negative charge. And on a positive charge, you put the NAD. It comes in a liquid formula that you have to add liquid to the powder. And then this will get absorbed into my system by over about 6 to 8 hours, and I'll pull that off. Okay? But I've taken the supplements as well. I usually double up when I'm traveling.
Excuse me, I have a small question, my personal question. So how do you think fasting affects muscle building? Because I also try to build more muscles. Like for myself, I believe it's very important not only for males, but for females especially with aging. We need more muscles because it's the biggest organ and it improves insulin sensitivity. So I feel I need it. At the same time, I like fasting. Mm-hmm. I love fasting. How we pair this? How to fast properly and still build muscles? So I really want to know your opinion, like more in detail. Yeah. Because you told something, but I didn't catch.
Okay, great question. So I was I went nearly 20 years without missing a meal, would you believe it? I put myself under a lot of pressure. I was like, okay, I haven't missed a meal now. I gave up bodybuilding in 2009, but now I can't miss a meal because I've put myself under this much pressure that I've never missed a meal. I had a colonoscopy in, I think it was 2016. I had to fast, and I knew the benefits of fasting, so I thought, okay, well, now I'll start fasting. I've done 5-day fasts and all that sort of stuff, but what I found is a sweet spot, especially if you want to stay anabolic, is fasting on your non-training days. So if you're weight training hard, let's say 5 days a week, on 2 of those days, you're going to fast. However, if you are still conscious, because maybe you're still doing cardio on those days, about being in a catabolic environment, then you would supplement with essential amino acids on those fasting days. But, you know,
I actually supplement amino acids, yeah.
You're doing it then.
I do.
Just make sure it's essential amino acids and not branch chain.
Yeah, it's very good quality. It's plant-based,
Perfect.
good quality. Yeah, thank you for your suggestion.
Of course.
I understand.
Hi, thank you. I had a question about peptides, because I think there's not enough clarity, and what I understand is that it's not regulated, so you can find peptides probably now many places, but how do we differentiate a peptide that is not tainted or that is worth taking and or not? So there's a lot of confusion around that, at least in my brain.
Yeah, unfortunately, the FDA cracked down on this last year, and we had like compounds, tailor-made compounds that were making them predominantly. And then the FDA came down, so now it's become like the wild, wild west. So there are doctors that will prescribe it. You can go to telemed doctors, TRT clinics, etc. They will actually prescribe it, and they usually have their own compound pharmacies. There are a couple of places online that I have seen the third-party testing, and I have seen the COAs. I'm not affiliated with these companies by any means, but Limitless Life Peptides, I don't know if you guys follow Jay Campbell at all. He's very much into the peptide community, and he swears by them. And the other one is Peptide Sciences. But again, it's buyer beware.
Hi, Kris.
Hello.
Can you recommend a really good way to supplement for a glutathione? I do a bioidentical that I got, I think, in Austin when we were there. But do you think that's the best way, or would you do injectables?
Yeah, so what I'll generally do, I'll do oral and injectables. I don't necessarily do the IVs. I like to trickle dose everything. I don't like to have a massive bang with the NAD or the glutathione. However, if I'm traveling, it may be a little bit different because I know I'm going to be exposed to like more viral overload. But generally what I'll do is do an oral every single day. Cetria is more of an oral bioavailable glutathione. And they sell to many brands out there. And I'll do an injectable, usually 1 day on, 1 day off. It's a subcutaneous injection, and again, it's mostly when I'm traveling. But I don't do the high dose unless I feel like I'm coming down with something, I'm not sleeping well. That's when I'll usually do the IVs.
Hi, 2 quick questions. One, you mentioned not doing a cold plunge after you work out. Is that just in terms of the sympathetic nervous system? If you follow that with a hot, relaxing shower, is that okay?
So it's a good question because you can do too much of a good thing. So it's usually just a block, it blunts the hormetic response that you're going to get from the exercise. But it all depends what sort of exercise that you're doing. If you're doing a little bit more endurance-based work, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But if you're doing more muscle building, strength training work, I'd be a little bit more concerned. And again, the duration. If you're going to go in there for like 5 minutes, it's probably going to be too long. It is going to blunt the hormetic response. I have found, because I train in the morning, doing an ice bath before my workouts is phenomenal. I feel that you're able to get that much more nitric oxide into the system because then you have this flush of blood that goes from the core back out to your muscles and subcutaneously.
I have another question. You mentioned the Apollo in terms of also parasympathetic, sympathetic. Any comparison between that and other devices like the red light, for instance, like Symbix Biome?
Yeah, so it's more of a vagal nerve stimulator. That's what it is. So you'd compare it more to like the pulsetta, for instance. You can have one around your neck. I just don't like walking around with that thing around my neck. I don't mind if I'm at home, but when I'm traveling, I have this one on my ankle. So it's more of a vagal nerve stimulator. You know, I love it when I'm on planes to help sleep.
Hi. Can the time that we spend sleeping can be considered as a fasting? Maybe go to bed 10, wake up 6, and not eating until 8?
Of course, yeah, sleeping is definitely fasting, for sure. You're not eating unless you're like a lot of typical old school bodybuilders. You're getting up in the night twice a day or twice in the evening or something. But yeah, that would be contributing to your fasting time.
All right, one more question over here.
We're kind of a pair here, so I'll start with, do you have any like digestion biohacks for individuals trying to increase their calorie consumption for like bodybuilding, let's say?
Yeah, so dependent on the person. See, for instance, like I can eat red meat and go train. I can eat red meat and sleep. I can assimilate foods very, very quickly. So you may want to go for something that's easier to digest. Maybe it's going to be whey, maybe it's going to be eggs, maybe it's going to be fish. Maybe you want to take some sort of digestive enzymes with that and ensure that maybe you're supplementing with immunoglobulins. You'll get immunoglobulins from colostrum. So anything that's going to help with the gut bacteria. But I like a diverse range of prebiotics and probiotics. Of course, we've got carnivore, we've got paleo, we've got keto, stuff like that, which is all great, but I think diversity is the key.
Can I do one last? Yes. Question about supplements. There's a lot of confusion in like how much supplementation to take. I've done my own research and I take certain supplements that I think are good for me, but because the medical world, it's not a controlled substance and doctors really don't know a lot about supplementation. What do you recommend? I mean, because everybody's different. How do we figure out what to take? Because you could go down that rabbit hole and take a million different supplements.
Yeah, good question. I always say test and not guess. So I'll always go by blood work and see where the deficiencies are. So for instance, as an example, my mother would kill me if she would hear this right now. About 2 years ago, my mum and I didn't speak for about 6 months. She was very erratic, passive-aggressive, and we're both very, very stubborn. I was like, screw you, and she thought the same thing. It wasn't until we found out that she was very, very low in vitamin D, and she had to supplement with about 15,000 IU to begin with, come down to 10,000, completely changed her mental stability. So, as you said, every supplement has a benefit, but if you took all of them, you'd probably die. So you have to see what is most beneficial for you based on your deficiencies, so test and not guess. Yeah, you can...
Trace elements, vitamins. Trace elements, vitamins, you assess your level of all vitamins and trace elements. But actually, vitamin D can be tested very precise. So it's one of those vitamins or hormones that can be tested precise, but some other cannot be tested.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, exactly. So what we did, we started a little bit higher and then started bringing it down until we found that baseline.
And I actually prefer prebiotics over probiotics. As you said, we need diversity. And probiotics, they consist some certain strains. And I see on results with some clients that if they take probiotics for a long time, they have overgrowth of some good bacteria. They are good bacteria, but it's still not balanced. Yeah. So I prefer prebiotics over probiotics.
Yeah, and whatever you can do through food, the diversity that you're going to get through food at the end of the day.
Yeah, just look prebiotics in your food, and then your body just produces that probiotics.
Exactly. It's like some people, for instance, don't like vegetables. They don't like having their leafy greens. So then you've got a greens powder for those particular people, but you're going to suggest food first.
Thank you. I think it was very educational.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if anybody does have any other questions after, I will be down in the exhibition hall. However, I'm listening to Jean's talk first. So after his talk, I'll be downstairs.